confirming that coronavirus has arrived here.
When we were stuck inside, we wondered, would we face the plague of gun violence again? Will we fear gathering in our schools and our churches again? Will we be shot for the color of our skin again? But a fight for justice forced us out to fill the empty streets. Black Americans are still being killed for being black in America. The pandemic hitting Black, Indigenous, and people of color disproportionately has only worsened the epidemic of gun violence in those same communities. Because it's clear the fight for racial justice is still on, and we won't live without it. In Colorado, he stood against hatred, but in Wisconsin, he carried a Confederate flag. In Arizona, she stood for her patients, but in Michigan, she carried a swastika. They bought guns in record numbers, but we took it to the streets. So when we leave our homes this time, will the people carrying weapons of war and banners of hatred decide our future again? Or will we stand up and demonstrate our power? Our power means we demand all gun sales will be licensed. Our power means we demand weapons of war be banned for good. Our power means lawmakers must listen. Our power means we refuse to watch black people be murdered in the streets. Our power means we refuse to fear for our lives. We refuse to live without justice. It's our power, and we will use it.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Max Milkman. My pronouns are he, his. I am the co-state director for March for Our Lives, Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here tonight because we've had enough of the senseless gun violence destroying our communities. 2020 hasn't been the year we expected, but I know that our generation and young people will rise to any occasion, especially turning out to vote this election cycle. This year, we have a moment to use our power to go to the polls like never before and elect gun safety champions up and down the ballot. So we are turning here tonight to talk about why it is so important to vote and what is at stake this election year. Tonight, we will hear from activists, students, musicians, and survivors as we discuss why it is so important for us to vote and how we can impact and change this conversation when it comes to gun safety. I'd like to introduce March for Our Lives Philadelphia member, Zora Nelson.
Thanks, Max. Last week, I was scrolling through TikTok when I came across a video with the caption titled, "Growing Up in Philly Be Like." It was a skit of a girl sitting on her couch watching TV when all of a sudden gunshots are heard. However, in this skit, she barely even flinches at the sound and just continues watching TV. And I, being able to relate, thought that the video was hilarious. I laughed, shared it with all of my friends, and laughed again. But sometime later, I thought about the video again and realized that I had become desensitized to the gun violence issue in Philadelphia. Growing up in the city, it's just the norm to turn on local news and hear about gun-related incidents for a solid 15 minutes straight. And honestly, it's come to a point where I'll just say to myself, "Oh, that's sad," and go on about my day. And having friends and family that also grew up in the city, I know I'm not alone on this feeling. But it shouldn't have to be like that. It shouldn't be the norm to be surrounded and affected by gun violence your entire life. It shouldn't have to be, "Oh well, it's just Philly." Because honestly, I don't want my city, the city I grew up in and love, to be associated with violence. A city that I know is so much more than that. I'm tired of turning on the news. I'm tired of living in fear. And I know that you all are tired of it too, which is why you're here today. But I also want to tell you that it doesn't have to be like this. We, the young people, can change that narrative by exercising our right to vote. It's time that we stop being nonchalant and leaving it to the older people to fix all of our problems, especially the gun violence epidemic. Because in the end, this is our future that we are creating, and I don't want history to keep repeating itself. We are the ones that can create a better Philadelphia and a better nation. We are the ones that can truly make Philadelphia the city of brotherly love. The power is in our hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Zora. Up next is Jamira Burley, a gun violence survivor, social justice activist, and an internationally recognized speaker. You're muted. Sorry.
Well, clearly I'm a millennial. I don't understand technology. But hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for having me. I just want to shout out March for Our Lives, Philadelphia Youth Commission, and Ceasefire PA, because much of this feels like a full circle. When I started my activism journey nearly 15 years ago, it was in support of many of the organizations that I had mentioned, because it was shortly after the murder of my brother, Andre, who was 20 years old and who was shot and killed in Philadelphia. That moment for me solidified that there were dangerous times in which we oftentimes place young people in communities where they're constantly being bombarded with violence and a sense of hopelessness. Over the last 15 years, I've continued this journey of trying to bring awareness to the fact that inner city violence, police violence are not separate issues, but are indicative and representative of an entire country that has cultivated communities around the idea that we need to use violence to solve our problems. And we're not investing in other forms of mental health, of other forms of preventative measures that actually make our communities, our schools safer. And so I'm excited to be a part of this event because I think it's really about putting the power back into the hands of young people. When I became a youth activist, I was a firm believer that young people are the experts of their own experience, and that those who are closest to the problem are oftentimes closest to the solution. So young people are constantly told, they don't have enough money, they don't have enough power, they don't have the right title. But really, young people have always been at the forefront of change. They have been leading the marches, planning the marches, writing the legislation, advocating on behalf of those who are oftentimes the most vulnerable and the most marginalized. And so for young people who are tuning in tonight, this is a call to action for you. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but I am here to tell you that your vote matters and that your values should be reflective in who you vote for and the policies you support. Because at the end of the day, the world is the way it is because it was created so, right? So we can actually change that. We can change it by electing people into office who share our values, who believe that Black lives matter, who believes that Black liberation isn't about the separation of racisms, but is about recognizing that when we support those who are the most marginalized in our community, it actually makes all of us safer. And as someone who grew up in Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, to be very specific, I went to Overbrook High School, a community that is famously known for producing the likes of Will Smith. But there are other young people with dreams and aspirations who are some of the most smartest human beings that I've ever encountered. But oftentimes they're not given the tools, the resources, and the access to be able to take the ideas, to take the passion that they have to actually transform the world around us. And that's why this event is so important, because it actually was organized by young people for young people to display the need for why we need to cultivate more spaces and opportunities for young people to be at the table when decisions about them are being made and not be used as a tokenizing measure or to be used for entertainment, right, to draw sympathy. Young people actually have the tools to create the change. And so whether you are in North Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, whether you're in East Falls, whether you're in Fishtown, all of you as young people have the ideas and the passion, and we need your voices to, one, tell our politicians what they need to be doing, but also once they're elected to office, to hold them accountable every single step of the way. And for the young people who are tuning in who aren't yet old enough to vote, you still have influence over your parents, over your friends, over your aunts, over your cousins, to help them better understand why it's so important for them to either show up on election day to cast their vote or to mail their ballot in, because we need every single person to be a part of this process in order for us to save the very soul of America. And it's hard for me to say that, right? Because I am a Black woman growing up in America where I've never fully felt safe. But in this moment, in this time of seeing young people from so many different walks of life coming together, showing up in this moment, I'm encouraged to recognize that we are finally moving in a direction where people recognize that in order for us to find freedom and liberation for our individual selves, we also have to find freedom and liberation for everyone, regardless if they're homeless or the most wealthy. So I am honored to be a part of this event, and I encourage each and every one of you to figure out how you can be engaged, to get involved today, and to use your voices, your experiences to help transform the world around us, because young people have always been the change makers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamira, for sharing that powerful message. I'd now like to introduce Pennsylvania, March for Our Lives Pennsylvania co-director Lydia Kavor.
Thank you, Max. Hi, everyone. I'm Lydia Kavor. I live in Berks County, Pennsylvania, and I attend Conrad Weiser High School as a senior. I am Pennsylvania's new co-state director of March for Our Lives. I would like to thank all of you for joining us all here tonight. I would also like to thank all of our partners who are helping us in this fight to end gun violence. During these times of COVID, you would think gun violence would be down at a zero, but sadly, violence is still prevalent. For the past 2 years, the bulk of my advocacy has been dedicated to the prevention of gun violence, an issue that has recently taken its position as the forefront of public consciousness. The increasing level of common media reports of violence have left many of us feeling desensitized and detached from the violence pervading our environments. Our societal outlook on gun culture, which has been deeply ingrained into us since youth, has become detrimental to our communities. We must stand strong, especially during these times of police violence and a growing pandemic. I stand in solidarity with the Black and Brown communities that are filled with violence due to systemic issues that are engraved in our nation. In order to stop this gun epidemic, we must address its racist past. One of the most impactful things you can do right now is register to vote and elect lawmakers dedicated to protecting our schools and communities. In order to prevent gun violence, we must elect officials who will vow to protect us. It is in our power to make a difference, and we must use it in this upcoming election. In 2018, youth turnout was the highest in the nation for the midterm election, and young people's participation increased compared to 2014. We must come out again and vote because lives literally depend on it. Broadening youth voting is one of the vital tasks in strengthening our democracy. This issue is not an issue of Democrat or Republican. It's an issue of the people. Please support our cause, and to those who have already done so, thank you for your support. We, the youth of America, depend on the action you take today. Thank you, and be safe.
Hi, my name is Maya Halma, and I'm the founder and president of the Parkland High School chapter of March for Our Lives in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I'm so excited to be talking to you all about why we need to get out the vote. It's so important for us young people to be energized and passionate about creating change. I started my chapter because I think it's critical for young people to stand up for justice. Like so many of you, I was sick of seeing headlines of innocent lives lost to gun violence over and over and over again, and I was sick of adults not doing anything about it. We need to do better than the generations before us. We need to use our platform to speak up for issues that matter, and we need to come out and vote on November 3rd. In 2016, only 46% of 18 to 29-year-olds voted. For comparison, that's at least 12% lower than every other voting age block. More than 15 million people have turned the voting age since the last presidential election. This is the largest voting population increase of any age block. That means young people truly have the power to influence the election when we all vote. So in 2020, we need to increase that statistic because our vote counts and our vote matters. But how do we do that? How do we get out the vote and increase youth voter turnout? First, make sure you're registered to vote. You can check your status at votespa.com if you live in Pennsylvania. Then, make a plan for voting. This year, due to both the coronavirus and the delay of the U.S. Postal Service, it's not voting day, it's voting season. Whether you plan to vote by mail, through early voting, or at the polls on election day, you need to make that decision now. Create a plan so you make sure that your vote counts. If you're voting by mail, request a mail-in ballot by October 19th and send it in as soon as you receive it. If you're voting in person, make sure you're prepared. Find your polling place ahead of time. Bring your driver's license or another form of ID. Make sure you have a scheduled time in the day where you're absolutely certain that you will be able to vote. Next, spread the word about voting. Talk to all of your friends and family and coworkers and make sure they're registered and have a plan to vote, especially if they're young. Spread the word virtually through whatever means that you have, whether it be phone banking, text banking, or simply posting about it to your followers on social media. Whether you reach 100 people or 100,000 people, you have a platform and you have a moral responsibility to use it. Before you vote, you also need to get informed about who and what you'll be voting for. In Pennsylvania, some positions that you'll be voting for include the president, the auditor general, attorney general, state treasurer, your congressperson, and depending on where you live, your state representative, state senator, and other local officials like mayor. Do research on the candidates and make sure they support the issues that matter to you. Check out their campaign websites, their Twitter, or their official government websites and read through their proposals and what they've done in office. When we make informed decisions, we elect the right people to power. Now let's talk about why voting is a crucial aspect of our fight to end gun violence. What creates change in a country? Laws. Laws can help us increase background checks, or they can let guns fall into the wrong hands. Laws can help us hold the gun industry accountable, or they can enable it. When you vote, you choose who has the power to make these crucial decisions about gun violence. That's why it's so important to do your research. When you vote for a candidate that you know supports gun violence prevention rather than enabling gun violence, you bring us one step closer to ending this epidemic. But we can't stop with voting. Young people need to continue to speak up about ending gun violence even after November 3rd. This fight doesn't stop until no son, no daughter, no mother, no coworker, no worshiper, and no person dies from gun violence. So keep pushing, keep organizing and campaigning. Keep calling your representatives and asking them to address the systemic issues of gun violence. Keep having those tough conversations with your family and friends. Your work is so important and so needed right now. Us young people have the power to change the future and end this deadly epidemic of gun violence. Silence is complacency, and complacency is not an option. We need to speak up and speak out. Thank you, and let's get out the vote.
Guys, up next is a music video by Young Flames. They're a youth rap group based from Philly advocating for Black empowerment through their music. Give it up for a special performance from one of the hottest groups in Philly, Young Flames.
Flames with another one. Yo, Philly, put those guns down. Let's get it. Gonna do this. Put them guns down. Put them guns down. Put them guns down. Guns down. Put down the weed. Stop killing of greed. Hurt one another. Seen each other. The bleed. We come from Kings and Queens. We already know what that means. South on TV and all those made up scenes. We are so blessed. Ask people we're the best. Be proud of who you are. They say we're their trash. Heart. Yeah. Just do good from the heart. Let's tell about people. Keep fighting till we equal. Seven rights to the sequel. Let's come to the top. how we run this. No
We apologize for that. We're having technical difficulties. And now I'd like to introduce Young Flames. Hey, everyone.
What's up? Young Flames?
So thank you so much for your inspiring messages of telling people to put their guns down. I gotta ask, what encouraged you all to step out and speak up against gun violence?
Like the things that inspire us to speak up about like gun violence and stuff is like gun violence, racism, police brutality, like all the things that's in that category. They stand against that stuff.
And it makes us all want to come together as one and make it into a song so we can put it out into the community to make the world better.
That's why we make the music the way it is now. Why we speak about gun violence, police brutality, and throwing the guns down. So we all want to be black leaders. And if we hear the power in our voice, I feel like we should be able to use it. And while y'all at it, make sure y'all follow us on all social media platforms at Young Flames 215.
We can definitely follow you guys on social media, and it's really great to see young folk like you standing up against gun violence and police brutality. How old are you guys?
12, 13,
12
through 13. 12.
All right. So if you guys can stand up and speak out against gun violence, that means that we all can, and we owe it to you to make sure we have a safer future for everyone. Thank you so much for Young Flames for joining us. Please check them out on all their social media accounts. I'm sure we'll be posting their music videos shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. I'd now like to introduce Jessica Bernal Camejo from the Philadelphia Youth Commission.
Hi, my name is Jessica Bernal Camejo, and I am the Vice Chair for the Philadelphia Youth Commission. I was appointed by Councilwoman Catherine Gilmore Richardson to represent young people across the city. The Philadelphia Youth Commission is a group of young people selected by the City Council and the Mayor to represent the youth of Philadelphia. It's our job to make sure that our voices are being heard. In a year where everything has been shaken, my peers and I find no calm at home. Gun violence is so widespread that in nearly every neighborhood you can hear the pops of bullets at night. So far this year, we have lost 310 people to gun violence. 275 people alone were shot in August. Every month, this keeps getting worse. Not a single day has passed without at least 2 people being shot. The thought that maybe we or someone else we know getting shot is always on our minds. Disproportionately, it's us young people that have to absorb this. It's our friends, it's our families, it's our schools. With the vast majority of victims being around my age, every notification on my phone could be bad news. My little brother, he's only 9 years old, and he's growing up with this too. Every day on the news, we hear about kids who were playing outside their houses before they were shot. These kids, they won't be able to grow up and experience life, and it's their families that have to carry the weight. And while we can be changed by hardship, suffering this trauma without support is devastating. When I was a student at Girls High, lockdowns were normal, but it was one particular lockdown when we learned a peer of ours was shot that everything became real. She was shot on the shoulder, and if she was shot a few inches to the other side, this would have been a story of loss, not a survival. When I was a freshman, I remember an upperclassman being shot in the back and being paralyzed from the waist down forever. I remember hearing this news and being afraid to go to school. To grow up in Philly is to grow up on edge. After we learn that a friend of ours is slain or shot, the pain is often too sharp to feel. It's unbearable. You can't breathe. You can't feel. But there are reasons why the gun violence in Philly has been rising. The reasons being income inequality, underfunding public housing, under-resourced public services, underperforming schools, lack of opportunity, and lastly, easy access to firearms to high-risk people. As young people, we have to do something. We have waited for action and seen few results. We must mobilize for the push of legislative changes we need. That means voting, and that means marching. But we also have to be there for our peers. Too often, it is a person who's barely into their adulthood who pulls the trigger. As a youth commission, we must be in every neighborhood to support. We young people need to communicate with our elected officials. We need to call. We need to email. Philadelphia's young people have to band together to combat this. We have to make sure that our voices are being heard. Losing a friend or a loved one isn't a choice, but what we do after can mean someone else avoids this pain. If we do not act, another generation will be ripped apart and will suffer the consequences. We do not deserve this, and Philadelphia can't handle this.
Thank you, Jessica. In 2018, we marched to end gun violence. In 2019, we went on strike to protect our environment. This summer, we marched for racial equality. Now, we're marching to the polls to demand so much more from our elected officials. We need politicians who will stand up for gun safety, not bow down to the gun lobby. We need leaders who believe in a green future that protects our environment and fights to address the racial disparities climate change creates. We need lawmakers who will break down the school-to-prison pipeline and focus on creating safe and equitable educations for all so we can disrupt the cycles of systemic poverty. Young people need to vote, and we need to vote in record-breaking numbers this year. There is so much at stake November 3rd, like the future of our environment and the safety of our communities from gun violence. If we don't show up and vote, young people won't have a seat at the table when lawmakers make decisions that impact us. It's time for us to use our power to make sure our voices are heard loud and clear this November. Register to vote. Pull out your phone right now and text VOTE to 954-954 to register to vote. Get your friends, classmates, family members, and neighbors registered to vote and apply to vote by mail too, which you can do at votespa.com. When we show up together, we win. That's our power. It's using our voice and saying enough is enough. Together, we can vote to make Pennsylvania safer for everyone and stop this senseless gun violence. Now, I would like to introduce Paul Farber from Monument Lab.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's an honor to be here with March for Our Lives, Ceasefire PA, Youth Commission Philly, all of the partners here. And I'm here to echo that call to get out to vote and to make sure that we count every vote. Our life depends on it. Our city depends on it. And really, this is our push. You know, I'm here with Monument Lab. We're a multiracial coalition of artists, students, educators. We critically engage the monuments that we've inherited, and we try to unearth the next generation of monuments through stories of social justice. You know, we define monument as a statement of power and presence in public. And that includes those stone and marble and bronze statues, but it also includes activism and poetry and music and all the ways that we make our presence felt. Because if you have the time, the money, and the power to build a monument, you do it. But if you don't have the time, money, or the power, you gather next to monuments that exist to amplify your presence and make your voice heard. As you know, throughout this summer, we've seen headlines every day about monuments being toppled or other kinds of reckoning with our past. And of course, we know that the past is not just the past, that stories of enslavement, of inequality, of Native American dispossession of lands, of segregation, of inequality. Those aren't things that just live behind museum glass. They affect our everyday politics, the way that we live in our city today. It's a question of what are our values and what are our visions. We believe that artists, young people, are change agents, that are visionaries. They're ear to the ground. They are understanding that we can make a different society, that we no longer have to delay a more free, a more just world that we know exists. There's no putting it off. I'm inspired by my students. I'm inspired by young people like the Monument Lab Fellows, Zy Bryan in Charlottesville, Virginia, who as a high school student started the petition to take down the Robert E. Lee statue, and is now a nationally renowned activist pushing for monumental justice in Virginia and elsewhere. I think about A Long Walk Home in Chicago, a group of young women artists and activists organizing to end violence against women and girls. And I think about across Philly, from Germantown to South Philly, Southwest, in Mount Airy, in West Philly, wherever you are, I know that young people have vision. Young people have power, and it's our job to make sure that we organize, strategize, and look forward. You know, I want us to think about when you see in the news these stories of monuments. It's not just that they're being taken down. It's not just that they haven't fully represented our democracy. It's that they've stood there for generations. And most often, we know that they celebrate war, they celebrate conflict, but they don't speak to the everyday experiences. And that includes what we are proud of in our city and also our losses, our grief. I think about all the young people across Philadelphia who are forced to build small memorials for their friends, for their family members, for their loved ones on street corners. Those are monuments too. And so how do we understand that the experience of youth activists can power our vision for the next generation, not just of monuments, but of systems of justice, of systems of democracy, and we use our imagination and our power together. So I say we know that history doesn't happen because a white dude on a horse up on a statue looks off into the distance. We know history happens because we organize, we strategize, we listen together. We think about intergenerational and intersectional forms of communication, of imagination. So get out the vote, let's count every vote, and let's be making sure that we're tireless in it. So I want to make sure you're out at the polls, and I want to see that we are making sure that we're changing history. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for those inspiring words. Jojo DeWaldy is next. He is Pennsylvania's Deputy Director.
Hey everybody, my name is Jojo Dawadi, and I'm currently serving as the State Deputy Director for March for Our Lives Pennsylvania. And over the past 3.5 years or so, and especially over the past 4 or 5 months or so, I've been asking myself, how does one make a difference? Yes, sure, protesting and signing a petition helps, but what does one have to do to truly make a difference? And I'm sure that's a question all of you have been asking yourselves, especially as the November election approaches. This past summer, we have seen, and for some, firsthand, what youth civic engagement can look like. That can range from participating in a Black Lives Matter protest, joining virtual meetings like this one, and even something as simple as phone banking for your local candidate. But what does all of that amount to? Why are we even doing all of these things? And the answer to that last question is that we're doing all of these things because we want some type of change. And that change can range from having amendments made to preset causes to systematic racism, police reform, and also gun violence prevention laws. But the thing about a democracy is that yes, the power lies within its people. But that's simply because we get to choose who gets elected, not because we get to choose what laws pass and what laws don't pass. Which is exactly why you need to use your power to vote in order to elect somebody with the same ideology as you who can represent your values in your government so that you can have some say in what laws pass and what laws don't pass. And a wise man once said, you need your permit before your license, you need the chicken before the egg, and you need to register to vote before actually being able to vote. which is why I'm urging all of you who are watching this video and who are attending this rally, who have not done so already, to register to vote for the November election. Voting is the most easiest and most efficient thing you can do to really make a difference, and at the same time, the most easiest way to participate in the political process. So why not take that step?
Thank you, Jojo. Up next is Philadelphia Councilwoman Helen Gim.
Hey, warriors who are out there, I bring you greetings of love and peace. I hope people are healthy and are staying safe. Most importantly, I want to talk about what this moment means to us. There's been a lot of talk about politics and what it means and how your vote matters. But I also want to make clear that our politics don't begin or end at the ballot box. As a longtime community organizer, my politics have never started with politicians. It's always started with a sense of us, with the people we love, with the issues we care about, and the campaigns and activities that get us up and out the door because it feels too important and exciting to miss. More than at any time in recent memory, I know that young people are not only getting politicized in this moment, but they are leading the political moments which are defining this time. Whether it's the Fight for 15, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's March for Our Lives and gun control, whether it's paid sick leave, a Green New Deal, abolish ICE, or stopping the privatization of our public schools. Your voices count. It means that you have more power now, whether you're 7 or 17 years old. The movement sweeping through our streets and our communities is incredibly powerful. And for me, our politics can only be as big as our movements. So my hope for all of you who are watching out there is to get excited about this moment. At this moment, never forget that a 16-year-old girl got into a boat and crossed an ocean and shamed our president to do better. It's important to stay local. Congress and the White House, sure, they may be a horror show, and it's critically important, of course, as you have heard, to vote in people who share our values and our visions. But you also don't have to wait around for a new Congress. You can actually make change locally, and often in even more significant ways. Now, I'm going to admit that I'm really biased. I'm a local elected official. I sit on city council. I'm the co-chair of an organization called Local Progress, which is made up of school board members and utility board commissioners and district attorneys and state's attorneys and mayors all across the country. And I want to say that what's happening on the ground right now for municipal and state offices are often some of the most exciting campaigns for people to be a part of. You door knock, you talk to neighbors, you flyer, you create great slogans and graphics, and you have fun. And most important, you elect people who can make change in your lifetime. I worked for 20 years to end a state takeover of our public school systems. And when I came into office, within my first 2 years, led the charge to actually make that happen. Philadelphia elected a lifelong civil rights defender to become its district attorney, and we were able to reduce the jail population enough to close down a county jail in less than 2 years. Change isn't easy, but it doesn't have to move at a glacial pace all the time. And in this moment, it's really important that we raise up these issues because we saw before what has happened time and time again, that your voices can shame politicians to do so much better than what we have done before. Your voices can bring power and clarity to this moment. You can bring humanity in a city that has seen more than 100 juveniles and young people get shot. This is a really incredibly powerful moment. I want to tell you that the world will always be a better place, but not necessarily. I'm a mom with 3 kids. I live here in the city of Philadelphia. I know what it feels like to walk through here. I can't tell you that the world is going to be better just because it's the world. I can only tell you that the world will be better if you make it better. The work you do now, the relationships that you build, the trust and integrity that you have will define you. It will make your work authentic. It will change things in your lifetime. I ask you to invest in movements, to stay passionate, to vote, and then keep on going. Nothing is ever fixed in this world, least of all power.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Gim. Up next is Michael Nevitt, the Policy Director for our state team.
Hi, I'm Michael Nevitt, college student in Philly and the policy director of March for Our Lives PA. As other speakers have discussed, gun violence is rooted deep in our society. We see the effects of its deadly thorns, but they originate in a tangled network of inequality, hatred, and ignorance entrenched below the surface. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to uprooting the system. It requires activism and legislation and community building. This November in Pennsylvania, it requires voting. The State House and State Senate are experiencing some of the closest elections in our lifetimes, all across the Commonwealth. Many current legislators have done nothing but till the soil as violence has continued to flourish in Pennsylvania. Next year, the state government could address the educational disparities that Councilmember Gim described. It could restore voting access to young people, working people, and people of color who've been shut out by oppressive voting restrictions. It could support affordable housing, join the Sunrise Movement in enacting environmental justice, and ensure that every working person in Pennsylvania gets paid more than the minimum wage of $7.25 every hour. All of these will help root out gun violence, one week at a time, but it's only possible if we vote in this election. In addition, Pennsylvania is one of the states that will decide who sits in the White House. The President of the United States has the power to acquire funding for violence intervention programs in cities like Philadelphia. Under his guidance, the CDC can study the epidemic of gun violence and combat it using evidence-based approaches. He can use the federal government to stand against violence motivated by white supremacy, misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia. He can appoint a Secretary of Education who supports mental and behavioral health programs in schools and decrease the suicide risk. None of these solutions on their own are perfect. Uprooting gun violence is a constant struggle that can never be solved with one election or one candidate. But voting this November is a really important start. That's why we have our two comprehensive student-written plans, one for a safer Pennsylvania and one for a safer America. We need elected officials who will listen to young people, who we can hold accountable. And when young people make the difference in November, they will listen to us. We'll hold them to it. Every student who votes in this election is a gardener snipping out a weed. It will take time and effort and lots of teamwork. But soon enough, we'll be able to build a safe and beautiful garden for all of us. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Michael, for those powerful words. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for joining us tonight. This past year has been crazy, and I'm happy that you could all make it here tonight. We appreciate all of the support that you all have been giving us. This took a lot of work, and without all of you, it would not have worked. Thank you to all the speakers, partners, and Philly Council member Helen Gim. You were all inspirational, and thank you for working with us in the fight to end gun violence. As you all heard from the amazing speakers tonight, we have to come out and vote this November. We are bringing our power to the polls. Get ready. Before you go, please text ACTION to 954-954 to join us in this fight. Thank you again, and I hope you all have a good and safe night.